Now, the rest of the story. Her name was Frances, and yet from diapers to college diploma, nobody ever called her anything but Fanny. Fanny Rose. When she arrived in Hollywood, a gifted young singer with her sights on a movie career, she was prepared to work hard. She'd put in lots of practice. She'd overcome childhood polio through sheer determination and vigorous sports. As a young Jewish girl in a predominantly Christian community, she drove herself to excel with particular enthusiasm. And when she gave it all she had, especially when she sang. It had been said that she could start a fire by rubbing two notes together. So, when Fanny Rose arrived in Hollywood, she was ready to work, prepared for anything except for somebody trying to change her politics. Now, Hollywood in the early 1940s was not quite the politically conscious community it would become a decade later. However, there were political zealots in town. One of them attempted subtly to subvert young Fanny Rose. You see, Fanny was a Republican, and this new friend of hers kept trying ever so diligently to show her the error of her political thought. And he seemed like such a nice man. But he was terribly concerned with so many liberal causes and issues involving human rights. Whenever he heard of a union strike, he felt instinctively that the strikers were right. Whenever he heard rumors about communist infiltrators here or there, he just laughed, saying the nearest communists were in Russia. And Fanny Rose was beguiled by his easy charm and his obvious compassion for the less fortunate. I have always been a Democrat, the gentleman said, and it was his sincerest desire that starlet Fanny Rose became a Democrat, too. What do you know? The friendly persuasion worked. It worked. This gentleman's reasoning convinced Fanny to convert in a grand way. I mean, thereafter, Fanny Rose did not merely vote Democratic, she lived Democratic, and would for the rest of her life. You remember Fanny Rose. You remember her by the name she chose after she started singing, by the name which became her legal name in 1944, Dinah Shore. Dinah Shore, a more devoted and outspoken Democrat Hollywood has never seen. She became an ardent supporter of FDR, Truman, Stevenson, Kennedy. She made a personal goal of convincing fellow Democrat Gregory Peck to run for the United States Senate. And yet for decades it was a show business axiom. Like John Wayne's grit and Garbo's privacy, Dinah was a Democrat. And she, as you know, once a resolute Republican, owed her conversion to a subtle subversion to the friendly persuasion of a fellow star who was then the most determined Democrat of them all. He could not have known that his determination would cost him Dinah's vote. Almost 40 years later, the zealous left-winger who turned to Dinah Democratic in 1943 was Ronald Reagan. And now you know the rest of the story.